Hello, Fountain here, and today I'm going to do a video on one of my favorite topics, like one of my favorite kind of very three-dimensional reality topics, and that is tropical fruit. And I guess to sum up kind of like how much I love tropical fruit would be for me to share that I literally moved countries so that I could experience more local, ripe, organic, tropical fruit. I come from a beautiful country, New Zealand, Aotearoa, and now I live in Australia, in Queensland. And yeah, there's a lot of me is like, oh, I love so much about New Zealand, but I don't love the weather. And one of the main reasons I don't love about the weather is because of the food it produces, in the sense that it doesn't really produce like beautiful tropical fruit. There's a lot of delicious fruits and vegetables in New Zealand. Yeah, very yummy. But it was good for a change, because it can be really hard to get really good quality, like organic, ripe tropical fruit. And of course it's not really local, because it normally comes from another country. Yeah, so first one. But before I go into that, I do want to say I'm not actually numbering these in a particular order in which is my favorite. It was really hard to put it into 5 because I do love quite a lot of tropical fruits, but there's also a few that I'm like, just don't love too much, and that's okay too. So first one I want to mention is mangosteen. Now, I know for a lot of people that actually don't know what a mangosteen is, and it originates sort of Southeast Asia and Thailand, and you don't necessarily find it in many parts of the world, but in particular times of the year, obviously when it's in season in northern Queensland, and you can kind of get it sort of southeast Queensland as well, you can get the purple little fruit of mangosteen. It's purple on the outside, should I say, and the skin is quite thick, but it's got this beautiful white flesh in the inside, and it's often called the queen of fruits. Durian being the king, mangosteen being the queen. And to describe the flavour, it's normally quite juicy, slightly sweet, and slightly has a sour flavour. And now, as with all fruits, all fruits are good for immunity. All fruits are pretty much good for digestion if it is ripe, because there's some fruits people eat that are not ripe, and they're going to cause digestive issues, and if they're not ripe, they might be better off being cooked. That's a slight digression. And obviously, all fruits and vegetables have got lots of particular minerals and vitamins in them, but yeah, so I go through some of the things that these fruits can be good for. I'm not saying they're going to cure anything. I've got to be really careful about the words I choose. I'm not a medical practitioner, I'm not a nutritionist. They may assist in things. That is the terminology I've used, okay? So yeah, it can be obviously good for body functions with the black sapote. Some say it could be really good for DNA production. Some say it can be really good for muscle contraction. It can be really good for wound healing. It can obviously be good for immunity, but it can also be good for nerve signaling as well. Signaling. My apologies. I've just recorded, this is my 6th video that I've just recorded today, so I'm getting there. Bear with me. Okay, and then the next one I'll talk about, some people call it the black sapote, or they might call it chocolate pudding fruit. Another thing to bear in mind, all of these fruits probably have some Latin name. They all probably have a name that's not English. They all probably have a name that varies so much depending on the dialect in which it's used to describe it as well. So if I say the fruit, it might be best to look it up, see what it's like. You might know it as another name, and if you do, I highly recommend leaving that in the comment section down below. Okay, back to the black sapote. So these often originate from Mexico, Central America, and Colombia. Also, another thing to bear in mind, some of these fruits can be grown in other places around the world other than where they originate from. Obviously, that sort of stuff has happened with a lot of our modern culture. I won't go too much into that. Now, the black sapote actually kind of comes from the persimmon family, which is another really delicious fruit, I must say. But I don't know if I'd necessarily put that in the tropical fruit section. But if you do, let me know your reasonings why down below, because I'm very curious to know. Yeah, so the colour and the texture of a ripe, remember this again, ripe black sapote fruit is going to be a lot like an actual chocolate pudding. Not like it is a chocolate pudding, it's not exactly like chocolate, it's a lot like a chocolate pudding. And I do understand that a chocolate pudding is a terminology that's only used in very particular kind of cultures, because some places in the world don't even know what chocolate is, don't know what cacao is, don't know what I mean by the word pudding. But for those that do, I guess it's the best kind of reference point I can describe what the taste and texture of a black sapote is. And if you're very much into like kind of very sweet tasting things, you could sweeten it more by taking the seeds out, of course, peeling off the skin, but blending it up with some soaked dates. That can really bring it up to another level. But it's not necessary, but if you really want to, you know, bring it up the next level, and you could add some cacao in there as well. Anyway, I slightly digress. So obviously, once again, being a fruit, it's good for digestion. It also can be really good for vision, and once again, good for immunity. So next one I want to talk about, I like calling it Cherimoya. Most people, in particular Western English-speaking culture, would probably call it a custard apple. And they originate from the Americas, and they're very juicy, very sweet. Yeah, there's another fruit similar to it. There's actually quite a few fruits very similar to it that are quite nice as well. But yeah, the custard apple definitely would have to be mine. It's a funny fruit because sometimes it'll ripen really fast in one spot and not in the others. So you kind of have to either, when that happens, you kind of have to either, you know, eat it when it's just starting to ripen that spot, but then the rest of it won't be ripe, or you kind of just have to let that spot go bad and then wait for the rest of it to ripen. So, but if it's a tree ripened fruit, you might not necessarily experience that, because often it kind of ripens all and it's full, it's all at once, all together, and it's very beautiful. Anyway, now custard apple. Yeah, that's really good. It's got a lot of antioxidants, can be really good for eye health, really good for digestion again. It's got anti-cancer properties. I'm not saying it's curing anything or it's going to prevent you from getting cancer completely, but, you know, just putting it out there. And once again, obviously really good for immunity. Now, next one, jackfruit. Now, this one originates from South India and Malaysia, from what I know. You know, you're welcome to do your research, find out more information about these fruits, obviously. You know, and get in contact with the people that these fruits come from, in the sense of where they originate from, because, you know, they're going to probably potentially share more stories, more cultural, you know, kind of interesting things about the fruit, maybe what they used it for, maybe what it was associated with. And it's also, on a side note, it's really interesting when you start looking into the shapes of foods, you know, sort of especially plant foods, right, and what they look like, and then discovering what parts of the body they can be really good for, and sometimes it's associated with a particular colour and there's a correlation, or it's associated with a particular shape. So yeah, that's really interesting. I digress. So yeah, back to the jackfruit. Most people would probably say it's the biggest fruit in the world, in the sense it can grow insanely huge. You know, if one was to fall on you, if it wasn't ripe, which usually doesn't happen, right? But fruit doesn't always necessarily fall from the tree when it's not ripe, but it can do. You know, it could do a bit of damage, but like if it was soft and like, you know, ripe and it fell from the tree, well, it'd probably just splatter all over you. So, but still, good to be cautious around a jackfruit tree, considering the size of the fruit. You know, it's not as dangerous as something like a durian falling on your head or a bunya nut, but yeah, good to bear in mind. And obviously, you know, some of these fruits you can cook them when they're not ripe. Jackfruit being one of them. It's often used in a lot of dishes. I've noticed like the amount of things you can buy in a supermarket now with jackfruit in a tin, and jackfruit meat this and da 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 da, and that's really skyrocketed, which is, you know, it's good to see. I'd much rather people be finding like meat alternatives that are made out of a fruit than, you know, something that probably gets processed in a it's more processed. Some of the things when they kind of make that are like soy protein. And I'm not saying that's terrible stuff, like it's good transition food for some people. It might be a treat or whatever, depending on where you're sitting in your journey, and your food journey. But I'd much rather see people using meat alternatives like a jackfruit. It's a bit more of a whole food. You add some spices in it, you prepare it. And anyway, I digress. So when the jackfruit is ripe, which can take a lot of patience if you're buying it from a shop sometimes, and jackfruit, again, another side note, can sometimes be one of those fruits where it starts to ripen, like in one spot, but it takes ages in the other. So yeah, you've got to really take good care of that. Maybe I could recommend that you probably, when you go buy your jackfruit, especially your first one, like go with a jackfruit expert, not an expert, but someone who definitely knows what they're looking for. So yeah, when ripe and raw, often like it's very sweet. It's kind of got a bit of a subtle banana, subtle pineapple kind of taste to it. I'm not the biggest fan of pineapple. Like, it's got to be a very particular kind of pineapple for me to really enjoy pineapple, which is not something you can get at a supermarket, and it's even really hard to find in a market sometimes. Now, I have heard sometimes people are a little bit allergic to some of the resins and stuff that jackfruit can give off. So obviously you want to be careful with that. Like, maybe the first time you're trying it, maybe do a test on whether you can actually have it or not. It's not common, but I have heard that can happen. When you're getting obviously a full jackfruit, some of the resins that come off it can make your hands very sticky. So a good trick for that is before you start opening it and getting into it, because you're going to need your hands. Like, it's a hands-on fruit, as with a lot of fruits. Like, that's why a lot of people say fruit is often referred to as kind of the most natural sort of form of food for humans, because we often can get into a lot of it with our hands. We don't really need utensils often. It's not the rule, but it definitely occurs in a lot of fruit, right? So yeah, putting oil, like olive oil and stuff, on your hands before you get into the jackfruit is going to help, because otherwise it just starts to stick to everything. And try not to get it on your clothes. Not a big deal if you do, but yeah, just oil on your hands and you'll be able to get into that jackfruit, and hopefully it won't stick too much to your hands. You might have to reapply it again once or twice depending on how big the fruit is and how long it takes you to get through opening it and getting all the pods out. So, and for me, like, the texture is a little bit kind of like a bubble gum kind of texture. Like, obviously you can chew it and then swallow it and it does break down, but when you kind of first get into it, it's a really interesting texture, that one. And I know you can roast the seeds and you can do things with the seeds as well, which is really cool. It's a particular way in how you do that. I would normally boil them, then I would spice them and roast them. That's how I like to eat the jackfruit seeds, but it does take a bit of time getting all the shelling off, and sometimes it can actually be quite painful, the shell, trying to get it off underneath your nails. So yeah, there could be a few tips and tricks on how to get the shells off the jackfruit, but anyone knows that, leave that in the comment section down below. So jackfruit, good for vitamin C, of course. Most fruits are very high in vitamin C. Anti-inflammatory, can help with lowering blood sugar. Obviously, a correlation with that is also going to help with your heart health. Of course, it can be really good for your immunity. Some also say it can be really good for your skin as well. Now, the last fruit that I want to talk about is probably the most well-known. I think most people in, I guess I'd say, Western societies have heard of the term mango. And like, I don't really consider it like the most exciting kind of fruit compared to the other ones. But like, when you get a really good mango that really vibes with you, because there's so many varieties, it's unbelievable. And there are so many varieties of all the other ones that I've just said too, but the mango is like, it's an unbelievable amount of varieties. Obviously the mango itself kind of originates from, South Asia. So finding like the mango that really jives with you, because of the so many varieties, they can really vary so much in taste. I find like most of the time, if they're ripe, they're often sweet, they're often juicy, especially if they're tree ripened. Okay, excuse me, it just cut out because I had run out of space on their phone. So anyway, as I was saying, I have tried quite a few different types of mangoes through some of the travels that I've experienced, and I've often found actually sometimes the smallest fruits are often the most sweetest. Don't ask me why, although I do have a theory behind that. So yeah, just because you see the biggest mango on the shelf doesn't necessarily mean that that is the best mango. But yeah, definitely try different varieties, especially if they're grown like locally to where you are. If your environment is really conducive to the mango, you might want to get in contact with some permaculture friends and check that out first. You could grow some of your own as well. Here in Queensland, often you may find, mangoes just kind of growing on the road, all sorts of places, so, which is quite cool. So yeah, mango, it's normally pretty high in vitamin A, vitamin C, has some anti-cancer properties, and once again can be really good for your digestion if it is ripe. Obviously with the mango you can also eat it not ripe, but usually it'd be recommended that it's done so through pickling or through cooking as well. So yeah, let me know what your favorite tropical fruits or just your favorite fruits are in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear what you've got to say. Yes, I do know the durian, king of the fruits, was not on that list because if I'm honest, I haven't really been in the right place at the right time with what I would call a durian expert to really experience that fruit to its full potential. I'm open to it. The situation just has not arisen in the last 6 or so years that I have been pondering on that to happen at some point. I have tried it, but only with it being frozen, so I don't really feel like that's the full potential experience that I could have with that fruit. So yes, I do understand that durian is often a very peculiar taste and smell, but for those that love it, they definitely put it up there as their favorite fruit. So yeah, leave in that comment section down below anything that you want to add, and if you've got any questions, of course, put that in the comment section down below, and you can also contact me through my various social media platforms, and the links for those are in the description box below. I'll see you in the next vlog.